Good evening. Welcome to a forum for the Weld County Sheriff. This forum is sponsored by the Greeley Police Officers Association, the League of Women Voters, and the Greeley Tribune. Randy Bangert is going to be our moderator for the forum. And the candidates are Keith Olson, Steve Reams, and Jeff Rodriguez. I am Kathleen Milligan, and I represent the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. It has worked for more than 93 years to educate the electorate, register voters, and make government at all levels more accessible and responsive to citizens. Formed by those who successfully fought to gain the right to vote for women, the League now is organized with both men and women as members in more than 800 communities in every state, with more than 140,000 members and supporters nationwide, dedicated to informing voters. The League is nonpartisan, and it does not endorse candidates. However, sometimes the League will endorse issues after it has studied it with its members. Now, I would like to just give you a brief synopsis of the ground rules that the candidates have agreed to and that you should be aware of for the forum. There should be no clapping, cheering, or any response to candidate statements or remarks during the forum. No campaign banners, signs, literature, handouts, or other campaign paraphernalia will be allowed in this meeting room. However, campaign literature can be outside this auditorium. The candidates will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement and a closing statement, and 1.5 minutes to answer questions. There will be some prepared questions, and there will be an opportunity for the audience to present their questions. If you decide that you would like to have a question answered, if you raise your hand, there are people stationed throughout the auditorium who will then either give you a card if you don't already have one, or will collect your card so that we may submit it to the moderator. We will screen out questions that are repetitive or have already been answered by candidates. So you might, since we've already gotten a lot of questions, you might want to wait until we are well into the forum to see if your question has been already answered. But if it hasn't, just let a volunteer know, and certainly you can submit a question. Any videotaping or audio recording of the forum is the sole property of the League of Women Voters and may not be used in any way by the candidates. Permission must be obtained by the sponsors to videotape this forum. And for your information, we are videotaping it and will be putting it on the Greeley Tribune website and the Greeley Police Officers Association website and the League of Women Voters website. So you will have ample opportunity to see the forum, or people who are not here can see it. Would you please make sure that your cell phones are turned off? The League believes that democracy is not a spectator sport, and you all have demonstrated that tonight. The League and the GPOA and the Tribune are very happy that you are here, and you certainly demonstrate your interest in learning about the candidates and making informed choices when you vote. Thank you for your support for the democratic process. And now, Randy Bangert will begin.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to extend my personal welcome and that of the Greeley Tribunes for everybody being here tonight. The Tribune, of course, has sponsored or co-sponsored or covered many of these kinds of forums over the years. And I've rarely seen a crowd this big at one of these. We're usually lucky to get 20 or 30 people. So thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. As Kathleen said, democracy is not a spectator sport, it's a participatory sport. So thank you for being here and submitting your questions. I think we will then begin and hear from the candidates. Early on, we drew names and numbers to determine the order. And going first with their opening statements is Steve Reams, to be followed by Jeff Rodriguez, and then Keith Olson. So Steve, go right ahead.
Well, welcome everyone tonight. It's like Randy said, it's great to see a crowd like this, and it shows the importance that a sheriff's race plays in our community. I am Steve Reams, but more importantly, I am the husband to Sherry Reams in the front row here, and the father to my 3 sons, Drew, Zachary, and Carson. I moved to Weld County in 1995 to attend UNC, and within just a few weeks I knew this was the place that I was going to call home. In 1997, I began my career in law enforcement with the Weld County Sheriff's Office. I started as an entry-level corrections officer and started pursuing my career by working my way up through the ranks to my current position, where I am the Public Safety Bureau Chief and I oversee the Operations Division of the Weld County Sheriff's Office. But in about 2005, I knew that I was going to be running for sheriff at some point whenever the opportunity presented itself. So I started to prepare and try to figure out how I could be the best sheriff and the best sheriff's candidate possible. So I took a very diversified career path through the sheriff's office by working not only in the patrol division, but also in the jail and back and forth several times. I was able to work as an entry-level officer in the jail and on patrol, a mid-level supervisor in the jail and on patrol, and as the chief executive over the jail and the patrol division where I'm currently at now. My background and my experience gives me a very unique perspective on the sheriff's office. It gives me an opportunity to look at all the different perspectives of the sheriff's office and understand what the needs are of Weld County. It would be a true honor and blessing to have your support and your vote, and I hope that tonight we can answer some of your questions and definitely earn that support in my race for Weld County Sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Drawing number 2 was Jeff Rodriguez. Go ahead, Jeff.
Good evening. Thanks for the support showing up. A lot more people than I thought were going to be here, so that's nice to see. I am born and raised here in Weld County. So are both my parents. My wife up there, she's also from here as well as her parents. We're lifetime residents. We have 3 sons. All 3 of them graduated from District 6 schools. One currently in UNC with pre-med. We own a family business. We own a gym here in town. I started my law enforcement career, I guess, in a strange way than other people. I grew up you could probably throw a rock here and hit my house. I grew up just down the street, got in a little bit of trouble, and a couple of gritty police officers decided to take me under their wing. I became a gritty police explorer. Did that till I was married. Got married at 18, worked at Montfort like everybody else did in my neighborhood. Became a general foreman there, started as a cleanup guy, worked all my way up as a supervisor to a general foreman. Then I decided, you know what, law enforcement looks good. Started work at the county jail, worked there for 15 years. I was a division commander for almost 6 in the jail. It's been a rough go. Started my career with as my gym right now, and I do train quite a few fighters. I was a coach here for the city of Greeley for about 17 years, always involved in my community. I know as a law enforcement officer, we serve our community. I want to continue serving the community in the best way I know how. I know I'm the right man for this job. Thank you. I hope you earn your support today.
Thank you, Jeff. And going last with the prepared statement is Keith Olson.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Greeley Police Officers Association, and the Greeley Tribune for hosting this. And more importantly, I want to thank all of you for attending. I think this is an important race. In the history of Weld County Sheriff, rarely do we have this type of contested race for the position of sheriff. And I can tell you it's been since 1974 the last time someone from outside this sheriff's department was elected sheriff. I have the courage and I have the drive to challenge the status quo. I'm offering the citizens of Greeley and the voters the opportunity to end the next in line selection of our sheriffs. And I'll begin by saying that I never intended to enter this race. My entire career has been serving the victims and citizens of Weld County. The only advancement that I ever received in my work that was pre-planned or predestined for some thought of elected office, the only intent I ever had in law enforcement was serving the victims, and the responsibility that I accepted year after year was based on a victim's needs or the needs of the community. For example, 1993, the city of Greeley, the police department specifically, asked me to take on the problems that had beset Greeley, that had manifested itself in the gangs in the neighborhoods of our city. I was a one-man gang unit, and that grew into a large task force when I retired in 2009. 2009, I was asked by the district attorney of Weld County to take on white-collar crime, take on the responsibility of heading up the investigations staff of the Weld County District Attorney's Office, and I welcome that challenge. Now I welcome the challenge to be the sheriff and have a positive impact on effective law enforcement in Weld County. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We'll now move on to some prepared questions that were prepared by the sponsors, the Tribune, the Greeley Police Officers Association, and the League of Women Voters. And Jeff, you get first crack at this question, which is, what are your plans for making the Weld County Sheriff's Department the best it can be? In other words, what is your vision for the department?
My vision's pretty big. To start off, training. The biggest problem that I see with the jail is we can't keep staffed. We can't keep staffed on patrol. We can't keep our staff in the jail. There's reasons for that, and I want to curb those reasons. I want to make us so we're the law enforcement agency everybody wants to go to. We've been the stepping stone for years. The 15 years I was there, everybody wants to just get in, get that badge, get a few years in, get out and go to another department. There's no reason we shouldn't be the go-to department. We don't get along with GPD. We need to patch these up. We've been known for years as the department that doesn't get along with anybody. That needs to stop. My vision is start our training, keep our officers. We have so many good officers, so much good talent, and we just keep flushing them away. Needs to stop.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith, you're next in line.
I have a distinct vision for the law enforcement in Weld County, and I believe that it begins with the Sheriff's Office because it is the largest agency in the county, and it has a direct impact on every citizen in Weld County, regardless if your city or your town provides law enforcement service to you, the Sheriff's Department has an impact. And I will tell you this. In 2007, we had 10,000 fugitives that were wanted in Weld County. By 2012, that number had grown to 12,000. Comments made in excuse for that by this administration was it's the inability to staff a fugitive unit. They had no one funded all those years to run the fugitive unit, so they were approved one deputy to track down 12,000 fugitives. All the while, we were funding 10 deputies to run traffic control at a cost of $1 million. That's one of the concerns I have. The second one is the high turnover rate that Jeff Rodriguez talked about. In the last 18 months, we've had 49 correctional officers leave the employment of the Weld County Jail. We've had 15 deputies leave the employment. Sheriff Cook, echoed by Reams, that they have been unable to fully staff the jail in the last 17 years. 17 years is long enough to fix a problem, and I aim to fix it.
Thank you, Keith. Steve, you get final shot at that question.
Thanks. My plans for the Sheriff's Office are to make sure that the agency continues to grow and service the people in the community. I believe the Sheriff's Office has a good reputation with the citizens of Weld County, and I believe that's proven through our crime stats. We've continually lowered the crime rate in Weld County by nearly 50% over the last 10 years. As sheriff, I think the biggest ground gain you can make is to simply involve the citizens of Weld County into the law enforcement process. There's not a person in this room that's not invested in their own safety and the safety of their community. And I think opening the doors of the sheriff's office and inviting people to have a say in the way we do business is something that we've sorely lacked in all law enforcement, and it's a way that we can definitely improve the service of Weld County. We can talk about statistics and who's left and who's not with the sheriff's office, but ultimately it's the citizens of Weld County that we serve each and every day, and I'm going to make sure that we continue to provide the highest level of service possible.
Thank you, Steve. Keith, you'll get first crack at this next question. Some have questioned the professionalism of some members of the sheriff's office and their training and ability to handle major cases. Do you feel this is a problem, and if so, how would you address it?
I do feel it's a problem. I come from an agency and was directly involved in most homicide investigations at Greeley Police Department from 1985 to 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, we had no unsolved homicides over that time period. Currently, the Sheriff's Department has 29 unsolved homicides. That is an indication of poor training, ineffective delivery of law enforcement, and possibly leadership. And I believe a change in leadership can actually set the bar higher. Victims who have lost a loved one to some heinous crime have the right and they have the expectation to believe that their crime will be solved and that justice will be brought to them. And I fully expect that when we take on a criminal investigation at the Sheriff's Office under my leadership, the expectation is we will solve those crimes. We won't look for excuses of why crimes aren't being solved, such as it was a body dump. We will look for ways to solve the crime, and I've got the record to prove that we have the ability, I have the leadership, and I'll institute that type of effectiveness at Weld County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Keith. Steve, you get next shot at that question.
Sure. Anytime you don't think there's room for improvement in an organization, you can have a realization like the Denver Broncos did at the Super Bowl. And you always realize no matter how good you think you are, there's always room for improvement. And the Sheriff's Office is no different. Inside of our organization, we've made leaps and bounds over the last few years of ensuring that our people are on the same sheet of music and they are working to a very high standard. But that standard doesn't come overnight. That standard is something that takes time. And that standard is something we've continually improved on at the Sheriff's Office. To address some issues in the jail, which most people in this crowd probably would never even be aware of, professional training in the jail is a concern, and that's something that has to be addressed each and every day. As far as ensuring that that training is available to corrections officers, that's something that can happen through a schedule change on day one. But ultimately, the whole issue is making sure that not only do we afford that training, but we bring in the highest quality trainers. That's something that I've already invested myself in doing, and that's something that we've already moved forward with at the Sheriff's Office. It's easy to throw stones at an organization, but truly, as a voter, what you have to do is look at the record of that organization. And I think the Sheriff's Office speaks for itself.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, you're next.
Well, I have to kind of agree on Keith with most of this, what he says. One thing that I would like to instill in the Sheriff's Office would involve you, the public. I would like to have a set of volunteers that would come in and maybe once a month, once a quarter, let us know what you guys think of what's going on. Tell us how you feel. Owning my own business has given me a lot of insight on how I treat members of my gym. I ask them constantly, how are we doing? What's going on? How can we improve? It seems to be most people, when they get a badge, they become badge heavy or a little arrogant. Happens in all departments. So it doesn't seem like we want to hear that criticism, what we're doing wrong. We do wrong. We're not perfect. So I would like to have members of the community step up and tell us how we're doing and let us know. We have some kind of public forum where we can do some checks and balances. We have a lot of ground to make up with our public. We've had escapes, we've had murder, we have had a lot of stuff go through the Sheriff's Office. I intend on fixing it.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve, you get first shot at this next question. And one thing I should mention, I think most of you are aware, but Jeff is a Democrat. Steve and Keith are both Republicans and will face off in a primary that I believe ends on June 24th. And then Jeff will face the winner of the primary. We do have a fourth candidate, Richard Day, who couldn't be here tonight because of a scheduling conflict. Apparently he's running as an independent. Okay, Steve, the next question is, what is your position on enforcing laws that are already in place, specifically gun laws?
Well, I believe anytime you're looking at enforcing laws, there's obviously a priority that you have to set for your organization, and you have to figure out what is in the best interest of the citizens of Weld County. So, for instance, in this county, in 2003, the citizens of Weld County made it an obvious concern that we needed to go out and enforce traffic-related concerns. We had a lot of traffic fatalities that year, 92 in total, and so our priority became going out and enforcing traffic rules and trying to make sure that we reduce the fatalities on our roadways, and have met that with a high rate of success. Although we still have fatalities on our roadways, it's much decreased. But in all fairness, you can't enforce every law that's on the books. So you have to pick the ones that do the most for the public out there. So when it comes to the most recent round of gun laws, they're simply not enforceable. I don't know where they do any good at reducing crime in Weld County, and I think all they do is they take an honest gun owner and make them a criminal. And I don't see any point in focusing our attention on a gun law that's not enforceable when we can be out making a bigger bang for the buck, so to speak, and ensuring that your safety is our paramount concern.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Jeff, you're next.
Well, this is a question that's been asked to me a lot, so here's the answer that I truly believe is right. When people always say this is an unenforceable law, this is hard law to do, you know what? Drug dealers are hard to catch. Rapists are hard to catch. All laws are hard to enforce. Speeders are hard to catch. What do we teach our children when we decide we're not going to follow this law or this rule? But I will tell you guys this. I will never take a gun away. I will never take a gun away from a law-abiding citizen.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith.
I'd like to start by saying that I have one concern when it comes to a sheriff deciding what laws his department enforces. Flies in the face of the rule of law. A sheriff's job is to administer the law that is handed down by the legislature or by initiation from the people. It's not our job to decide which jobs we enforce. Do we have discretion? Absolutely. And that discretion can come to bear, but we certainly don't pick and choose which laws. Prime example is the new laws, gun laws that were passed by the legislation. I'm in agreement. Those laws are a direct affront to the honest citizens of Weld County and to the state. It takes honest citizens and turns them into criminals, while it gives criminals a pass because they aren't going to follow the law. Criminals are going to have guns, are going to use guns. That legislation did nothing to end that. And so I will, the one caveat is I don't pick and choose what laws are on the books and which ones we enforce, but I can certainly make sure that we use discretion.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Jeff, you'll get to go first on this next question, and I'll just remind everybody that we have about a half dozen prepared questions here, but we're also going to take questions from the audience. I think the league is collecting those, but feel free to keep submitting them, and we'll convert over to those audience questions fairly soon here. Again, Jeff, you get first shot at this question. What specific plans do you have to better the relationship between the Greeley Police Department and the Sheriff's Office, such as the SWAT team, investigations, command staff, etc.?
My specific plan would be to train together. I think, I know when I did my training, it was probably my best bonding time when I was a commander dealing with my officers and my deputies. I think if we did more training together, we would bond together better. We would be more at ease calling each other for help when we needed it. We have K-9 units, they have a K-9 unit. We should be training together. Our SWAT team should definitely be training together, especially when it comes to school safety. We should all know what every school looks like, especially in Greeley, in all of Weld County. we may even need Greeley officers to help us out there, with their SWAT team.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Keith, you're next.
I think what improves camaraderie between agencies, and it's not just Greeley and Weld County Sheriff's Department, but it's every department within the county. And I think shared services is very important. We used to have a shared SWAT team. Greeley Police Department had a SWAT team, and the Sheriff's Department would rely on them. If Greeley Police Department needed canines, they would rely on the Sheriff's Office. We used to have a shared communications center. Now that's separate. You know, we've started moving away from joint services and camaraderie, and I think that we need to, again, give a relief to the taxpayers and find ways to work together and use the money in a joint effort, as opposed to each of us having our own little kingdom. What's really disturbing is Greeley Police Department has an armored personnel carrier. They have an MRAP, which is a mine-resistant armored personnel vehicle used in Iraq, and that has caused quite the stir across the nation, law enforcement becoming military units. What does the Sheriff's Office do? They went and acquired an MRAP. So now they have a mine-resistant armored personnel carrier. They aren't willing to let you know, but that's the degree of transparency. Because if they let you know ahead of time, then it'll cause controversy before the election.
Thank you, Keith. And Steve.
I would like to address a point from the earlier question. It was stated that the sheriff's job is to enforce the laws of the legislator. Actually, the sheriff is a constitutional position, and the sheriff makes an oath to uphold the Constitution, not to go out and work specifically for the state legislators. That's why they are elected by the people in this crowd. But as far as improving the relationship with GPD or any other law enforcement agency in this county, I think it's important for everyone to know that that starts from the top down. And it takes all the law enforcement leaders in this county coming together and saying, how can we get better as a whole? How can we work together and improve the services to the citizens of Weld County? And again, that's a top-down approach. It's not something that you can necessarily force through training. It's something you have to force through day-to-day routines by exchanging officers from time to time, working in each other's shoes, working alongside one another. And that's something that we've done in years past between the jail and the patrol division of the Sheriff's Office, and I think that's something that could easily be pushed out to all the other law enforcement agencies in Weld County. And as far as combining our efforts with our SWAT teams and our canine teams, that is happening. That's happening more and more each day, and we are becoming very accustomed with working with one another. It's just a matter of it takes time to make all those things click, and I think we're in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Keith, you get first shot at this next question. This will be the last one from the prepared list, and then we'll switch over to some of the audience questions. Steve, how do you plan to recruit top talent in the Sheriff's Office when the pay and benefits lag behind other large agencies in the area?
Thanks, Mike. What I would like to see happen is we need to examine the pay and benefits. Weld County Sheriff's Department, starting correctional officer, I believe $44,000 a year. That's not a bad wage, but if you add on to or subtract from that income a $1,300 a month medical insurance premium, all of a sudden you've greatly decreased the take-home pay of that young deputy and his family. And I think that adds to the revolving door of the Sheriff's Office. So I believe in advocating for better benefits, particularly in the medical insurance arena for our deputies and for all the county employees for that matter. Do you realize that the elected sheriff of Weld County pays no insurance premium? He pays no deductible. There's no cost for prescriptions. The sheriff can't advocate for his employees when he's got a Cadillac plan in his pocket. When I become sheriff, I'm under the same plan as the employees. That way they can be assured that I will be advocating for their benefits, not mine.
Thank you, Keith. And Steve, you get to go next.
Well, I think addressing the recruiting and retention issue at the sheriff's office, Keith's not wrong and when he says that our starting pay is good. Our starting pay is pretty comparable to what you'd see around the state, whether it's in our patrol division or in our jail side. It is a matter of how quickly those officers can earn raises through our agency. It takes 16 years for an officer to top out at a particular pay scale. And when law enforcement officers on average live 10 years less than the general population, a 16-year time frame for someone to top out at a particular pay grade is probably not the best situation. As far as insurance benefits, I don't think there's a person in here that is probably jumping for joy with our recent insurance benefits, and the county's no different. There definitely has to be an examination of, is there a possibility of reducing those costs for employees? But ultimately, that's something that the sheriff has to advocate with the county commissioners and work together instead of fighting one another to try to get to that solution. And as far as the sheriff advocating for the employees, I've already started the process of doing a salary survey with my employees, and they are driving the ship. They are going out and doing the research to find out what is the best alternative to where we're at now and where we should be, so that I can take that battle forward if given the opportunity, or whoever can take that battle forward if given the opportunity, to try to make sure that we make Weld County a home for people who want to come and work in our law enforcement agency.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, your turn.
I think the answer is pretty simple as far as keeping our people and recruiting them. We need to invest in our youth. We do have a Police Explorer program, but only very few officers pay attention to it. To a lot of officers, it's a joke. A lot of deputies, it's a joke. GPD has a really good program right now. They visit schools. We're not visiting any schools. You can start at the sheriff's office at 19 years old. You can graduate from high school, become working at the sheriff's office, making $43,000 a year. It's pretty good for a recent graduate of high school. We're not visiting these kids. We're not letting them know what's out there. I think that's where we need to start. As far as keeping people employed, that's where we need to step up our training, work with our management team. My best management training came when I worked in a packing house. I thought when I came over to the sheriff's office, I was going to see real teamwork, real leadership. I was sorely mistaken. The best management I ever seen came from a packing house. The best training I received came from a packing house, from a slaughterhouse.
Thank you, Jeff. And Steve, you get to go first with the next question, which is the first one from our audience. How long do you estimate it will take you to get jail staffing up to the levels to open all parts of the jail? And how do you plan on keeping those staffing levels up?
Sure. Well, that's kind of a trick question, because opening all the wings of the jail right now wouldn't be a service to the taxpayers. We actually have enough jail space to hold 800 plus inmates when our average daily population in the jail is only between 600 and 650. And that's just by the inflow of people coming into the facility. That's not because we've barred anyone from coming in. So opening the entire facility would definitely be a disservice to the citizens. As far as addressing the staffing issue, we have. We are currently, we're sitting with, I think, maybe one vacancy in our jail, and that's just been a product of running more frequent academies and giving better training up front so that our people understand what they're walking into on day one. You know, it does take a little bit of time to turn over the guard, and you know, over the last few years we've made some changes in order to make sure that we're hiring the right amount of people and we're getting them in the door at the right times and in an appropriate manner, so that we can be well staffed. I think the citizens of Weld County are being led down a bad path if they believe the jail is fraught with all kinds of problems. Come take a tour, you'll see how well the jail runs. Of course, staffing issues always crop up in any jail. You can look statewide or nationwide, but it is a problem that we're addressing nonstop, and I think we've made the curve to get ahead of it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Jeff, you're next.
Well, I have a little bit to add to that, because from what I'm noticing and what I know what goes on now, there's at least 3 or 4 overtime shifts every day at the jail as we speak. There's at least 3 or 4 people working overtime right now. To me, that's not staffed. I understand there's vacations and stuff, but that should be, I own a business. I know when my staffing is done, when I have somebody going on vacation, I have it covered. I don't cover it with overtime. That's something that all of our citizens from Weld County should be worried about. We should be looking into. That's a lot of overtime we're paying. These officers are making $23 an hour to up to $40 an hour, overtime $50 an hour to work overtime in a very strenuous, very stressful place. They're in a jail where their beat is everybody's a bad guy. This is a hard place to work, especially, I considered myself a hands-on commander. I shagged bodies, I did takedowns with everybody else. The jail is understaffed. We need better training and better management to keep our people.
And Keith, staffing levels at the jail.
Thank you. As sheriff, I want to be transparent, and if there's issues, I want to address those issues publicly and let the citizens know. I don't want to hide the truth, and the truth can be found in public hearings. This administration stated in November of 2012 that they would have the jail fully staffed come January 2013. It wasn't staffed. In July of 2013, they sent letters to the city stating that they wouldn't hold their municipal prisoners beyond 24 hours because of the severe staffing crisis, and they were trying to keep their inmates down to 500, their inmate population down to 500. You know, when there's issues, politicians will deny that it's an issue. This is one you can't deny. It can be found in past records. Here's the other thing that bothers me. If we don't have problems in the jail, then why did we have an inmate die as a result of his time in the jail when we have this administration stating that to be fair, protocols were in place and they worked? When an inmate dies of a drug overdose and we state that it worked, and then try to shift the blame to the state patrol or to the individual who passed away, that's not transparency.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Jeff, you get to go next. You get to go first with this next question. Have you ever been involved with a union, and as sheriff, would you support sheriff's deputies forming or joining a union?
The only involvement I ever had with the union was at the packing house back when I was there. It was Montfort, before it was JBS Swift, and I do not have problems with the union. Actually, they worked very well for their people. I would not oppose a union coming into the sheriff's office. I think it's something that some of the officers could actually really use.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith, you get to go next.
Yes, I was involved in a collective bargaining and the Greeley Police Officers Association. I was elected president back in the 90s and represented the union, I believe, for 3 or 4 years. And we did have collective bargaining. Absolutely benefited from it. Matter of fact, that was one of the draws that I left the sheriff's office for, was better pay and better benefits. And I left the sheriff's office after 3 years to go to Greeley and get an instant increase. After 3 years and being a supervisor at the sheriff's office, I left and still got a pay raise at Greeley Police Officers Association. I'm proud of my association with the Greeley Police Officers Association, but I will tell you this, I'm much wiser, and I have troubles. Matter of fact, I am against government entities engaged in collective bargaining because we are bargaining against tax dollars, not corporate profits. And so I'm against unionizing, but I will advocate for employees. I know that the way we keep good employees is make sure that their salaries and benefits are competitive with the rest of the county and the industry. And with the oil and gas industry already stealing employees from law enforcement because of higher pay and benefits, we got a problem in the future. Thank you.
Steve, the question about unions.
Yeah, I'm not a union supporter, just by my background. My interactions with the union have actually gone through my involvement on a school board when I was a school district administrator on the Weld R1 school board. where we actually de-unionized the school district to ensure that we were giving teachers the opportunity to excel to the highest level and rewarding those teachers who wanted to work the hardest. And I think you've seen that in the recent articles that came out in the Greeley Tribune. It did work. It's always about paying people for performance, and I think if we want to see people inside the Weld County Sheriff's Office be given an opportunity to be retained and held inside of our organization and be fostered inside of that organization, what we really need to do is figure out how to pay them for performance. The harder they work, the more they should be able to make. And I don't think that that's using the union mentality of sometimes working to the least common denominator is necessarily good for the citizens or the taxpayers who would obviously be in opposition or in an opposing view of a union. I know that the Greeley Police Officers Association does a lot of good things for the community and for their membership. I don't think it's a good fit for the Weld County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Keith, you get to go first with this next question. What are your plans to improve the victim witness unit since it is currently understaffed and missing out on grants that upper management didn't get around to submitting applications for?
Well, I wasn't aware that grants were missed, but that is something that has to be dealt with. If we're applying for funding for victim witnesses and we miss that opportunity because of a deadline, then again, that's an affront to the victims and witnesses. And I'm telling you, folks, the most important thing we can do in law enforcement is make sure that those people impacted by crime are receiving 100% effective service from law enforcement. No excuses. If you call in and report a crime, you shouldn't be told it's civil. If you call in and report a crime and then find out 6 months or a year later that no one investigated your crime, that's not effective service. The last time you left a car at a garage to get the engine repaired or the tires changed, did you check back in 6 months and see they hadn't started? Law enforcement has to be delivering good public service to the citizens, and I expect to improve the quality of service to the citizens.
Okay, Steve, you get the next stab at that question on the victims unit.
Sure. We did have some turnover inside of the organization that put a deadline for the Victims Services Unit for a particular grant in question, but that grant deadline was met, and our Victim Services Unit is fully staffed right now, and in fact they're recruiting nonstop. So if there's anybody out here who would like to be a volunteer victim advocate, we'd love to have you. It is a very professional organization, and it's something that in law enforcement, you know, it's hard to believe we ever did our job without them. And right now, I'm very proud of the two individuals that we have on staff full time, and the cadre of individuals that they're bringing on daily. We provide a good victim service to any victim out in Weld County, and to hear this kind of question even come up, it really doesn't have a place here.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Jeff, you're next.
Missing the grant, and that, well, we're not sure if we missed a grant. One person says we do, one says we didn't, but missing the grant should never happen in the sheriff's office. And again, the only excuse we got for that is our turnover. That's what turnover is costing us, stuff like that. We can't have it. Our victims advocates, I know we only have 2. I think we need 4. We're a big county, we're a huge county. We need way more than what we have. And volunteers are always nice to have, but it's always good to have somebody on payroll, on staff, to know that the job's getting done right.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Steve, you get first shot at this next question. What are your plans with the volunteers, reserves, and posse?
Sure. I think that's an organization that's been vastly underutilized, mostly because, quite frankly, there's been some political upheavals between the sheriff's office proper and that volunteer organization and some of the leadership of that volunteer organization. Again, it's about dropping the egos and figuring out how we can best serve the citizens of Weld County. I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not excited with where the volunteer program, the posse, the reserve program has been, and that's a sore spot for me with the sheriff's office. Obviously, I work there, but I don't get to make every call. If I had it my way, that unit would change overnight, and we would instantly start utilizing those folks to help take the burden off of the taxpayer and get more services out there from people who want to be invested in their law enforcement entity. Again, like I said earlier, you all have an investment in your own safety, and what better way of letting you be a part of that than to open the doors and invite you to be part of these organizations where many of you would love to contribute back to the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, what are your plans for the reserves and the posse?
Well, the posse is it's an awesome organization. We see them in the Stampede, and that's when most of the general public sees them. But they do so many searches. They do so much stuff for us. Reserve guys, they work in the jail. They're always out doing something. What I've noticed, what we do at the Sheriff's Office is we kind of blow these guys off. I don't know how many times we've had reserve guys come into the jail while I was a commander and want to work, want to do something, and we just kind of shrug them off on somebody. We're not there training them. I believe they all need to be trained. They want to be there. They're there for free, and they're helping us. What better thing can we have for our taxpayers than that? These guys go through our training. Most of them are post-certified. And another thing, I mean, the word posse, you know, that you look that up, that is actually a militia. That's what we're talking about when the Second Amendment comes up. They are our militia. That's what a posse is. I think we don't put enough resource in it.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith.
The Sheriff's Posse has my utmost respect. I've worked with them since 1979, and on major crime scenes where they've done searches. Every year I was out at the Stampede. They were an integral part of keeping the crowd safe, and they were just a tremendous benefit to law enforcement out there. Every agency that was involved out there always looked up to the posse. They are a fine professional group that's at the head of every ceremony, and they bring positive reflection on the Sheriff's Office, and they're professionals. The reserve program, that used to be 300 reserve deputies. They were engaged in coming in, getting cars, and going out and arresting fugitives. And now it's just a skeleton of the program that it was. These are dedicated people who donate their own time and their own money to serve the citizens. Great force multiplier, and many of them have 25 years of experience in law enforcement. And those are the type of individuals that I want to be a part of, and hopefully they want me to lead.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Jeff, you'll get first crack at this next question. If there are 12,000 fugitives in Weld County, how many of them are for nonviolent bench warrants or are actually the same individuals with multiple warrants? Is Weld County really as dangerous as some claim?
I don't believe so. I believe don't exactly know the statistics, but I don't believe that there are that many fugitives that are a threat to a lot of these bench warrants are missing court for traffic, child support, things like that. I know our fugitive unit has grown a little bit. I know our fugitive officers, they work pretty hard. They are going after our major guys first, and that's the way it should be. Most bench warrants are captured by, there's a lot of law enforcement in here, are captured by what? A simple traffic stop. That's usually how we clear up a lot of warrants. There are a lot of warrants out there, but I don't believe Weld County is as dangerous as it's pointing out right now.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Keith, you get next crack at that.
Great, thank you. The reason this became an issue is that I was struck by those numbers when I read it in the Greeley Tribune when Sheriff Cook said that in 2007 we had 10,000 warrants, Mr. and Miss Commissioner, and now in 2012 we have 12,000. Something needs to be done. I need a fugitive unit. So is that hyperbole or is that a true threat? So I looked into it myself. If Sheriff Cook and the Sheriff's Administration are making an issue of it, then maybe I should look into it. Not dangerous? 44 of those fugitives currently are wanted for sex assault on children. Those are the type of individuals that will continue to perpetrate crimes against their chosen victims. Not serious, 11 of those individuals are wanted for murder. Not serious, he talks about the high fatality rate. Do you realize that those fugitives, 1,660 are wanted for drunk driving? They've never been brought to court and answered for the original charge. You know, your choice if those aren't dangerous individuals, but I tend to think that people wanted for burglary, auto theft, assaults, gang members are dangerous individuals, and they contribute to the safety of our community.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Steve, you're up next.
Sure, we'll just get down to the brass tacks. There's a big difference between a fugitive and a warrant. A fugitive is someone who knows that they're wanted by the law and they're running from the law. Those are people that we should target and arrest and go find. And then there's those who have warrants. And out of that 12,000 number, well over 8,000 of those are for municipal warrants that many of us could have probably gotten at any point of our life. You go out and get a speeding ticket and you don't pay the fine on time. There you have a municipal warrant for a speeding ticket. Does that mean that that is not a crime that has to be enforced when a law enforcement officer makes contact with that individual? It absolutely does. But is that something that we need to go out and target and look for in Weld County? I don't know if that's the best use of our resources. When we developed a fugitive unit, it was to go after the 1,100 felonies, 1,100 felony warrants that are out there in the county, and many of those warrants are duplicated in the fact that one person has several of those warrants. They need to be picked up, they need to be taken to jail, but to throw out the term 12,000 fugitives running around the county, that would mean there's at least, I don't know, 10 or 12 of us in here that must be fugitives. So I just think that's an irresponsible number to talk about. I think what we have to do is look at the focus of what's the difference between a fugitive and a warrant and where we want to put our focus as a law enforcement agency.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And for the record, I'm not one of those 10 or 12. Let me see here. Keith, you get to go first with this one. Management styles vary from very hands-on to complete delegation of all authority. Where do you stand in that continuum? What is your management style?
Well, I think my management style is through leadership and by example. I'm not laissez-faire, and I'm not dictatorial, but I do believe in working. I don't believe in giving directions and then sitting in an office. I believe joining the individuals that are trying to accomplish a mission. I've done that from day one, and I'll continue to do that. So my leadership is one of guidance and high expectations, and then also praise when necessary, and take corrective action when necessary. Let me run back to those fugitives, because I know it caused a little chuckling in the audience. And I just want to say I appreciate that Steve cleared that up, because it was awful important when we were asking the commissioners. We didn't institute any caveats. We didn't say that it was only 8,000 municipal warrants. So it's awful interesting now we do that. Can we also say that we're using hyperbole when we stated that we have a 2-hour response time from our sheriff's department when we were testifying down at state capitol about the need for teachers being armed in the schools? Was that hyperbole or was that factual?
Thank you, Keith. Steve, you get next shot at that.
Sure, I think in any type of leadership roles, you have to be able to lead from the front. You have to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk, but you also have to be able to empower your employees to make decisions for themselves, and you have to give them the rein and the free range to go out and have independent ideas and maybe get to the same conclusion but in a different path. My goal has always been to set the bar, show how I would do it, and then if someone wants to come along that has a better process for making it work easier, faster, more efficient, so be it. We'll adopt it and we'll move forward. My goal is always just to do the best that we possibly can and increase our abilities each day, whether that be in the jail, patrol, courts. We're always looking for efficiencies, because it's not about throwing dollars at fixes, it's about throwing thought processes and working smarter, not harder.
Thank you, Steve. And Jeff, you get to go last on the question about your management style.
My management style is definitely a hands-on style. It's the way I was raised, it's the way I was trained, it's the way I've always done things. I have no problem rolling up my sleeves and jumping in there with the group. I like to show them I'm not perfect. There's always someone who does it better than me. So I like to get in there and get my hands dirty with everybody else. I've always thought of my management style as if you laid a string on the table. A real leader pulls the string. A false leader who dictates pushes the string. We all know what happens to the string. It bunches up. I'm one of those guys who does the pulling.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Steve, you get first shot at this next question. We're still asking questions from the audience. What are the challenges and differences that the Sheriff's Department faces in working in rural and urban communities? How do you propose to meet those challenges?
Well, I think the biggest challenge you face in Weld County, period, is that you have 4,000 square miles to cover, and those 4,000 square miles are a very diverse set of circumstances. You've got all the way down by Roggin, which is very rural, over to the Meade area, which is becoming very urbanized, Severance, Windsor. We have a lot of different obstacles to face, and for the patrol division to be able to adapt to that takes a unique set of skills that you don't just train a deputy to go out and handle the same call for service over and over. They're going to see things that they would otherwise not see in any other law enforcement agency. I think the biggest tackle or the biggest obstacle for the Sheriff's Office moving forward is making sure that every deputy gets quality training, not only initially, but throughout their career, to make sure that we are adapting to those changes that come up over time. 10 years ago, we would have never seen the amount of oil and gas traffic, nor would we have needed to know what any of that equipment represented. Today, that's an everyday occurrence, and we have to be well aware of those things going on out in the county. So the biggest thing is just being adaptive and not always reactive to new changes that come into the county, but being able to get ahead of the curve.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Jeff, you're next.
I think we're all from Weld County here, and being a patrolman out and deputy with our 4,000 square miles of terrain that we have, the first thing we got to learn is how to find an address. That seems to be the hardest thing that patrol deputies have to do. Second thing is, you better damn well know how to get a cow out of the road, because I've heard those calls several times, and how to put one down. We have a lot of diversity that we have to do in this county, because we have the same problems the city has, we just have a long way to go to get there. The best way we can do that is just by training and trying to up our technology, to maybe get some better GPS stuff in our cars so we can find our addresses a little faster. I think that would really help us with our times, our response times.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith, you're last on this question.
Thanks. I've witnessed the growth of Weld County from 1978. I was born and raised here in Colorado, and been working law enforcement in Weld County since 1978. Started at Fort Lupton, then Weld County Sheriff's Office, then 28 years at Greeley Police Department. So I've seen the growth. I've seen the two oil and gas booms that have occurred during my career, and I can tell you that one thing hasn't changed, and that's the law enforcement that we deliver to our rural citizens. One, that population, rural population is shrinking. It's now at 49,000 in a county of 269,000. So we are becoming an urban county. But one thing that hasn't changed is the need for law enforcement in those far reaches of the county. They don't see deputies very often out there. And the response time to the new Ramers and the Grovers and to Prospect Valley are impacted by deputies being assigned to the heavily populated areas. We've never solved that problem. I'd like to explore resident deputies perhaps, or figure out some way to start serving those citizens in the rural community.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Jeff, you'll get the first stab at this next question. Is it a priority for you that deputies have a good life-work balance?
That's a major priority. I know when I started at the Sheriff's Office, one of the things that really bothered me that I was always told is what happens here stays here. You don't take this stuff home. You bottle it up. I've seen so many deputies. I had so many officers come in my office when I was a commander and tell me about all this stuff that was going on. You know, there's so much stress in law enforcement. I always told new recruits, new academies, don't ever bottle it up. If you have a wife at home, if you have a husband at home, talk to them, tell them what's going on. This is a very stressful job. It's not just for our deputies and our corrections officers, it's for our staff. You know, we have a whole line of staff that sees everything else that goes on. There's so much stress that goes on in our jobs. We need to be able to share it. There has to be a clear balance. We need to have enough people so we have our days off. When jail officers are working 8 days in a row, 7 days in a row, 12-hour shifts, sometimes those 12-hour shifts even go 14 hours. You gotta be balanced somewhere. We gotta correct it.
Thank you, Jeff. Keith, you're next.
Thank you. That is a true problem. It adds to the high turnover rate at the sheriff's office, and it adds to the low morale. When you have deputies or correctional officers that are working 6, 7 consecutive days, 12-hour shifts, that's gonna manifest itself in several different ways. Problems at home. You're gonna have problems at work. Should we examine what type of effects those shifts are having on people? We know that studies say you shouldn't be rotating your shifts on a monthly basis, working 12-hour days for a month and then switching to 12-hour midnight shift. You know, that is bad on your body. Every study out there has said that you can't do that, yet we continually have done that for years at the sheriff's office with no end in sight. This is a big problem at the sheriff's office, and they've had 17 years to fix it. And I understand today they're saying that they might be shy one person. Well, the people I talked to today are still working 6 12-hour consecutive shifts and are asking for relief, and I'm listening.
Thank you, Keith. Steve, question is on life-work balance.
Sure. I feel like I should have my wife come up here and answer this question, because she complains a lot of times that I'm at work quite often. But in fairness, law enforcement is a tough job, and no one gets into this job understanding the full depth and breadth of the things they will see, whether it's in the jail or in patrol. That's why officers tend to live 10 years shorter than the average citizen. It's a tough environment. As an agency, it's our duty to make sure that our employees have time off and that they get time to relax and be with their families. And that is a concern if you have people that are working overtime or they're not getting that home time with their family. That's why we've done the things that we have to address our staffing issues and try to ensure that those officers are being taken care of. But at the end of the day, the officer also has responsibility to find things outside of the law enforcement world, to go out and find ways to decompress. And that's something that we promote from the time they're hired throughout their career. And as sheriff, I would definitely make sure that we worked a little harder to foster programs like that, so that we could give deputies an opportunity to go out and explore better ways to decompress, so to speak.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Keith, you'll go first on this next question, and we'll make this our final question from the audience, and then we'll move on to closing arguments or closing statements after this. Keith, the final question is, if elected sheriff, what are your priorities?
Thank you. Number one priority is the delivery of effective law enforcement to the citizens. Number two priority is going to make sure that we improve the lot of the employees of the sheriff's office. I want to make sure that that's a job that they show up at every day. They're proud to be there and enjoy the 30-plus years that I had in law enforcement, where I'm still pinching myself and can't believe that I was actually paid to do this job. I truly believe I never worked a day in my life, and I still believe that. And that's the type of attitude I want the employees at the sheriff's office to enjoy. I don't want it to be drudgery. Second priority is to make sure that we fix what's wrong. In the last 5 years, the sheriff's office budget has increased $5 million. That's an 18% increase over 5 years, with a net gain of three employees. Something's wrong there when we haven't had any major capital improvements. We haven't had a substantial employee increase, and we've only had a 4.5% pay increase for our employees, while their health insurance premiums over that 5 years has gone up 50%. Someone at the sheriff's office, instead of denial, should please offer the citizens what happened to the $5 million. What are we spending that money on besides overtime? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, or Keith. Steve, you get to go next with the question on what are your priorities.
Sure. Well, I kind of have two-pronged approach. One, the priority inside of the organization for a lot of the people in this room is to get back to some form of stability. Election years are tough. They're extremely tough on the employees inside of an organization. And just settling that down and letting people inside the organization understand what the game rules are from that point forward, I think would do worlds of wonders. And then we could start talking about the processes of combining our agency's efforts with the other agencies around the county to deliver more effective services. But to the citizens of Weld County, I think the best thing you can do is simply ask the citizens for feedback. Open those doors, like I said before, and ask how we can better serve the citizens. Because without that feedback loop, we just have to assume that we're doing the right thing. You know, when you're reducing crime by 50% over 10 years, I think that the merits of the Sheriff's Office speak pretty well. But to get down any lower, it is going to take help from the people of Weld County, and facilitating that openness is something that I strive to do from day one.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, what are your priorities as sheriff?
My first priority would be transparency. Seems like the Sheriff's Office has always had this little veil over it. Nobody ever wants to say what's going on. There's always so much stuff going on there that the public doesn't know about. We need to be more transparent. We're a government office. Everybody should be able to walk in and know what our budget looks like, what everything looks like, what all these auxiliary accounts are for, where's all this money going. That's the first issue. Second issue would be to staff our office. Get our officers in there, get our people in the jail working, get our people on patrol working. What I would like to see happen is our jail and patrol start getting along. Our jail officers and our patrol officers have a hard time getting along now. There's always seems to be that thing. Once you go on patrol from the jail, you never return back to the jail. And if you do, it's a bad thing. We need to make something like a job pairing, is what I'd like to do. We have certified peace officers that work in the jail. They can be doing stuff out on patrol. They could be helping. Same with the jail officers. They should be coming in and helping us out. We should be able to do our own reports from there. Our own criminal activity that happens in the jail. That's like its own city.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll wrap this up now with our closing statements. We'll reverse the order from the opening statements, which means, Keith, you get to go first, followed by Jeff, followed by Steve. You get 2 minutes for your closing statements, and our timekeepers down here will let you know if you run over. Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you. One of the primary motivations for me to enter this race was I've had a front row seat in law enforcement for 36 years. And I've saw where there's needs for improvement. I've seen the professional deputies and the professional correction officers that work for the Sheriff's Office. They are working under some really tough or in a tough environment. And I believe that they brought to me cause for me to enter this race, and I did. I was happy to enter the race. It wasn't for some itch that needed to be scratched. I'm perfectly content with my current job as the chief investigator for the DA's office. There's plenty of challenges, and there's plenty of ways for me to use my talents to improve the lot in life for citizens of Weld County. But I took this on because it's important to not only my family, my children, and now my grandchildren that are being raised here in Weld County, to make sure that we are supplying a safe community as they grow. And I want it to be a prosperous community. And I want them to enjoy the safety that I had as a child growing up in northern Colorado. And I refuse to allow that to fall to someone else if they aren't up to the challenge. And you know, a letter was just sent out just a couple days ago complaining that I'm attacking Sheriff Cook and disrespecting him. I'm not running against Sheriff Cook. I'm running against the past policies and procedures of the Sheriff's Office, and I'm running against a candidate who 20 years ago I had the same level of experience. He is a very bright guy. He's a very dedicated law enforcement officer, but he's not ready for the challenge yet. He's still hoping that Sheriff Cook will carry the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. And Jeff, you get to go next.
Well, I'm a life resident of this county and this community. I love my community. I've been volunteering for this community for over 20 years. I just feel I'm the right person for this job. I knew I wanted to do this job probably when I was a child. This is what I wanted to do. When I started working at the sheriff's office, I started noticing such bad management, bad use of resources. And when you speak up there, if you're not the right person, watch out. That needs to stop. Everybody should be able to speak their mind and should have no worry about consequence. Doesn't matter who you get along with, who's your pal, who you work on with cars on the weekends, or who you do what with. You do your job. I did my job. I was good at it. There are plenty of other people in here I see that did their job and are good at it, or were good at it. We can't do this anymore. We're running out of people, out of good people. We're becoming a department nobody wants to be at. I'm all for change. We have to change what's going on there.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve, 2 minutes for your final statement.
Sure. First, thank you for coming out tonight. The questions that were asked definitely give each candidate up here an opportunity to look at the concerns of the citizens of Weld County and figure out how are they going to best address those concerns moving into the future. I can tell you that you definitely can't measure a candidate by how long they've been in law enforcement or their own accolades. You have to look at what they've actually done. And I've done the job of training myself through the organization to ensure that I can step in day one as the Weld County Sheriff and not miss a beat. And in fact, I think we can improve services on day one. I'm not running for sheriff because I have an axe to grind or because it's some itch that I wanted to scratch. I'm running for sheriff because I think the citizens of Weld County deserve a professional law enforcement agency that's led by a leader who has gone out and received the training and experience they need to take over and move the organization forward each and every day. I appreciate the support that has been shown for my candidacy, and I appreciate everyone who's been out here tonight. The questions were great, and I look forward to these kind of forums in the future.
Thank you, Steve. I'd echo what Steve said. The questions were great. Again, it's wonderful to see so many people here tonight. You've all been politely sitting on your hands all night. I hope you would join me now in applauding the candidates. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, the Greeley Tribune, the Greeley Police Officers Association, and the League of Women Voters. We hope that this forum has helped to inform you to be well-educated citizens. The primary election is only beginning of this election cycle. Primary election day is June 24th. This is a mail-in election. Voter service centers will open on June 16th where you can drop off your ballot. Ballots will be mailed to voters on June 2nd. If you have more questions about the election process, you can contact the League of Women Voters or the Weld County Elections Office. Thank you again for attending, and have a good night.